Hello, welcome back. For the final session of today's event, we want to do something a bit different and a bit more feisty than a traditional panel discussion. So we're going to do something that's actually equally traditional, at least in the UK. We have an adversarial debate for you. So I have sitting on my left and right, 4 brave team members who are going to debate the question that you can see on the screen behind us all. This House believes that artificial intelligence will have a serious negative impact on academia and academic publishing. So the aim of this session is, unlike a panel, it's not to kind of discuss and share experiences and come to conclusions and find areas of common interest and so on. The aim, rather, of each team is to present as strong an argument as they can for their side, and also to call out any weaknesses they see in the opposing team's argument, and defend their own argument against any weaknesses the opposing team may identify. So the format is very simple. Each team will present its opening arguments as strongly as they can. We have 4 team members, 2 arguing for, opposing, 2 arguing against. The 4 here on my right or left, and against here on my left or right. There'll then be time for a little discussion involving some questions from the audience, we hope. And then at the end, they will sum up. The job of coming to conclusions, of weighing up the arguments that you're going to hear and deciding who is the most persuasive, is not for the teams on the side of me, it is for you, the audience, of course. And for that purpose, at the end of the session, we will ask you to vote on which of the 2 sides you come down on based on the strength of the arguments you've heard.
Setting your vote is not allowed.
And in order to make that vote meaningful, I'd also like to do a preliminary vote now before we've heard any arguments as a kind of baseline, just to understand how the room divides right now. So just to be crystal clear about this, okay? The statement on the screen behind me, if you are for that statement, you agree with that statement, it means that you think that AI risks having a negative effect. Right? AI is bad news. That is the positive agreement with that statement. On the other hand, if you think that AI is harmless or perhaps beneficial on balance in the future of academia and publishing, then that means you oppose the statement behind. So just to be completely clear, we've got that kind of weird inverted logic going on there. So if you're watching online, I'm going to launch the poll now. Please feel free to vote. And in the room, first of all, those who agree with the statement behind me, if you can wave at me if you think that AI threatens or is bad news for academia and publishing on balance, with your hand now. Okay, thank you. Very good, thank you very much. And now those who feel the other way, that AI at least is not a big risk. Okay, thank you. Fairly well split, but I'd say perhaps those who are against the motion have the more of a hill to climb. I'll let you know the result of the poll online when people online wake up and vote. There's one more thing I do want to say to the colleagues around me, which is that unlike a panel debate, we have no flexibility about timing. Obviously, if you overrun your allotted time, you are taking time from your opponents, and that will be most unsporting. And for that purpose, I have here a timepiece, which I will set to 5 minutes. And when you hear the annoying and unpleasant electronic noise, it means your time is up and you finish speaking to your arm, and the microphone says to your opponents, please. So I'll thank you for being very cooperative and helpful in that. So, oh, I didn't realize it was sticking up in the, okay, yeah, sorry, I didn't know it was there. I can. Done. And now we, well, it hasn't gone away. No, I can't. It's your answer for that. I'm going to do that. I'm sorry.
Into the corner, top right corner.
I've closed everything on my screen. I didn't want to see it on my screen here. Can you see it there? Oh dear. You know what? You know what? Never mind. We'll run out of time. If someone who knows better than me wants to run up and help out, I'd be very grateful. In the meantime, on my right, speaking for the motion, we have Kiera, who's research data manager at Cambridge University Press. She will open for the 4 team. And we have Erol, who is professor at the Institute of Theoretical and Applied Informatics. at the College Academy of Swansea. And speaking after them, on my left, your right, we have at the end here Susan Robertson, Professor of the First Theology of Education here at Wolfson College, standing in by way for Mark Heritage, who unfortunately couldn't make it at short notice. And Yogesh Dwivedi, who is Professor of Digital Marketing and Innovation at Swansea University. So, I'm going to stop the timer now and hand the microphone first to Kiera to make the opening statements for those in favour.
Hello. So if I remember going back a couple of decades to my high school debating experience, I'm supposed to start by defining the topic and what exactly we're arguing here. So when we say AI, obviously the big development in recent months has been generative AI and the ubiquity and accessibility of generative AI for huge audiences. Everyone now can go online, use ChatGPT, or use Midjourney to generate text, to generate images. This has been a really big change in recent months, and that I think is what is going to have, or what we're arguing is going to have a significant negative impact on academia and on academic publishing in general. And the main risk I would argue is that generative AI and access to being able to create so much content so easily runs the risk of undermining the value and the trust in research outputs and published research outputs. So there's no doubt whatsoever that AI is an incredibly powerful tool. It's obviously going to have incredible positive impacts on research as well. People are going to be doing all kinds of novel analysis, new kinds of investigations that have been enabled by this incredibly powerful technology. But a tool is, of course, used for the purposes of the people whose hands it is in. And we've now made this tool, this incredibly powerful tool, available to the entire planet. And that includes people who misunderstand the purpose and limitations of generative AI and what it can actually do and what it should and should not be used for. So people who are misusing it potentially in good faith. And of course, it includes people who intentionally fully understand the purpose and uses of AI and exploit it in bad faith. And of course, research, academia, research publishing industry is made of people, and among those people are both the people who don't understand the full implications and the people who are bad actors. And this is where we run into the risks of generative AI and the negative impact it will have on academic outputs. So in terms of the people who misunderstand these outputs, I'm sure you've seen things on the Twitter thread where people say, oh, I asked ChatGPT to generate an article for me and write some references, and then I checked the references and they were all fake. What's that about? It's like, well, yes, because the entire purpose of AI tool like ChatGPT is not to generate facts, is not to produce true references, it's to produce text in a style of the writing that you've asked it to generate. And people really do not understand this at this point. We see, you may have heard of the case of a lawyer in the USA where he asked ChatGPT to write a brief for him and cite various cases. And when the lawyer was not really sure whether these were real cases, he asked ChatGPT, hey, are these real cases you're citing? Do these really exist? And ChatGPT said, yeah, of course they do. Those are real cases. Absolutely. Yeah, this lawyer has now been fined and sanctioned for presenting false information to court. So even people who are professionals and experts in their fields don't understand the risks and limitations of AI and are using it in ways, even in good faith, that are undermining trust and the value of the content they're producing. And so AI gives people ways to use shortcuts, right? It makes it easy to generate content very quickly. And if there's one thing we know about academia and academic publishing, frankly, we incentivize shortcuts. We know that research is a time poor, that they're understaffed, under-resourced. The publish or perish mentality still exists despite many efforts to try and change that and try to change research policy to focus on things like the Declaration of Research Assessment, the DORA statement, which is now over 10 years old, and yet we're still seeing people focus on impact factors, focusing on these perverse incentives that encourage shortcuts. And so academia and the academic publishing industry are particularly badly placed to be exploited or to be accidentally undermined, even unintentionally, by good faith actors who are subject to these pressures and now have a new tool that might make things a little bit easier. And then, of course, there's bad actors, there's paper mills, there's false conferences, there's all sorts of people who will create content that seems legitimate on the surface until you dig a little bit deeper. And again, AI has given people a brand new tool to make it much, much easier to generate a false paper, to generate a piece of information that is not necessarily true. And of course, paper mills are a new thing, they've been around for years. We've been trying to combat them for years, but again, one of the main issues with academic publishing in academia is we're a very slow changing industry. We're not equipped to keep up with massive advances that AI and generative AI have changed in this industry in recent months. And so for those reasons, I think that, well, we argue that generative AI in particular is set to pose a really significant threat and have a really negative impact on academia and academic publishing as a slow-moving industry and as an industry that's based on trust that is set to be undermined even by people acting in good faith with a misunderstanding of how the technology works.
Thank you very much. It says here 2 seconds for me. That's what I want. Perfect timing. And now I'm very happy to first figure out how to reset this. And to pass the microphone now to my left, to Yogesh. I believe they're going to make the opening statement against the motion.
Thank you, Toby, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here. Obviously, I will go and make my statement, but before that, I would like to briefly respond to some of the points. So, one of the points was creating content so easily. I guess we all experiencing that since last 30 years, since the internet has come. Wikipedia has a lot of content, and anyone can use it at any point of time. And many times those are may or may not be authentic. In terms of people with misusing the generative AI or AI per se, I would say, I mean, all technologies require policy and regulations to be managed, and AI is no different. As long as we have those policies and regulations on place, it would not be very different from any technology. People don't understand the limitations. Another point was people don't understand the limitations. Well, diffusion of generative AI is much faster than any other technology in the past. If you look at within 8 months, almost everyone talking about it. So given the short span of time, obviously we do not expect that everyone would know about it. However, going forward in a year or 2 year time, we will see that everyone knows what are their major limitations. And also in terms of limitations, references and all, ChatGPT, which was GPT-3 version, since then we already have GPT-4, which is much powerful and much accurate responses it's providing. And we will see within 2 years, the capability of this technology is much better than what we see today. And therefore, the kind of responses we will get will be different. In order to not miss my core points, I'll just come back to and draw a parallel to the previous technology, actually, in order to show that generative AI is not really that threatening as we are perceiving at this moment. The first thing I would say, printing press came in the 15th century, and people were saying that, oh, it will destroy the writing, handwriting, it will create lots of misinformation. But we know that printing press has made huge positive impact on academia in terms of creating books, dissemination of knowledge to wider people. So that's one example. Internet was projected again at the beginning that it will destroy the source of credibility for the academic information. But it's not. We are using internet actually in various forms as a repository, as well as, today we have open access model. This would not have been possible if we didn't have internet. Okay. And likewise, the AI and generative AI can become can accelerate those activities that are provided by internet in favor of the humankind and for the publishing and education. Calculators. Everyone thought that calculators will undermine people's skill of numeration and calculation, but it's not. The people uses calculator for the repetitive tasks, for mundane tasks, and actually uses that time that they say for more better reasons. Same way, digital libraries were projected as kind of, it will obviously destroy the physical libraries. Well, some impact may happen, but then digital libraries created many positive points. For example, much easier to collaborate and access knowledge. And same way, online learning platforms, predictions or concerns or skepticism were that the online learning platform will destroy traditional education systems. Didn't happen, and it will not happen, because we have a purpose and value in traditional education system, and same way, AI powered, be it generative AI or any other form of AI, obviously can create personalized learning experiences for students, and also can become personalized assistant for the teachers, for lecturers. So it has many, many positive points to add on. And therefore, I will conclude that AI or generative AI is not a negative thing, and it will help us much better way than previous technologies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Strong opening statements, and I'll pass on to Erol to make a second statement on the floor.
Yeah, I was happy to hear that AI will get better with time, but there are also technologies that disappear over time. And the vote is for today, it's not for in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. So we just have to look at the situation today, and that's what we're talking about. The other point, I mean, there was the analogy of the internet, but the internet matured over quasi 20 years before it became common usage. So it got rid of a lot of its bugs and problems over that time. And that is why when it emerged fully, it was accepted fully. So that's the interesting thing. I'd also like to point out the fact, and you're all aware of this, is that the major AI researchers have themselves required or requested AI regulation. If the people who have developed the technology see the problems of that technology, they should be listened to. I myself do research on AI on a daily basis. I use it systematically. I use machine learning systematically for attack detection. The most recent paper I've submitted is that. The most recent paper I've published is on that. This doesn't mean I hate AI. Of course I don't. I like it. But generative AI that we're talking about is based on generating not facts. It's based on generating something that is most appealing and most plausible to the reader, which includes lies. For instance, looking myself up, I found I was a fellow of the Royal Society. I'm not. It's pleasing to be a fellow of the Royal Society, but I'm not. So things like that come in. They're very funny. Then I was talking to someone. I looked him up, a few weeks ago in Paris. I looked him up. He was dead, but he didn't seem to be dead in front of me. So there are very strange things that happen on the information that is given to you spontaneously. And that is what we have to be careful about, and how that we have to regulate. With respect to the situation in academia, the devaluation of publications has already begun. I chair a section of Academia Europaea. I already noticed it in our section meetings where we elected new members. We looked at members with a lot of publications coming from various countries under strong onus of suspicion, because we were wondering how those papers had been generated. So I think there's the phenomenon of devaluation of the value of what we are doing, which is standing there in front of us as academics, and we have to consider that. On the other hand, we can consider indeed that it is extremely interesting to be able to publish things rapidly and very productively and so on in terms of human time. However, it is important to consider that this can only be done if we associate the production of texts with a responsibility for those texts. That is, we should have to be able to assign a responsibility. Who's going to take the responsibility for that? Is it DeepMind? Is it Google? Who is going to assume the legal responsibility of the nonsense they produce? For instance, for the lawyer in the US. This is an open question, and I don't think we can launch into things like that without regulating them initially, to see how they develop and mature and correct themselves before we let everyone use them openly. In terms of Europe, we are receiving packages which are black boxes. We don't know what's inside. These are commercial packages that are not open source. We are all talking about open research. these packages are not open source. No one can go into them outside of the corporation that produces them. No one can go into them to check them and verify them. How can we support the widespread use of such things in academia in particular without knowing how they operate, how they work, and what their objectives are, how they optimize themselves? This is extremely important. They will optimize themselves for commercial purposes. Therefore, they will generate information that is pleasing and that creates clicks, and therefore that enhances publicity. So we have to look at this very carefully before we let this spread out into the academic world, into our teaching world. Of course, out in the commercial world, they will exist. However, here in our vote, we're talking about the academic context. We're not talking the world at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And for the final opening statements, I pass the floor to Susan.
Esteemed colleagues, you've heard the case for, and I'm going to hammer the last nails into the case against the motion, and that is that we believe that artificial intelligence will have positive effects. And we actually believe that it's the best place for AI and, for example, ChatGPT to kind of land in the academic world. Why do I say this, or why do we say this? Well, first, there's an inflation. There's a sense, we feel, that the problematic is put before you. The apocalyptic, the catastrophic, and yet the academy is a place of guarded optimism. We've heard many comments today about being time poor. Surely we can actually look at quite mundane tasks. Many who were commenting on the mundane tasks this morning, we could make some of our work way more efficient. There was a discussion about shortcuts, but what kind of shortcut wouldn't we kind of take to get to the destination if we felt essentially that ethics still there, it made a difference? We go to OED, we look at Google, maybe we go to Wikipedia. These are all basically technologies. We don't kind of spend a lot of time thinking that we've taken a shortcut to knowledge. We actually pat ourselves on the back and say, this is pretty smart that we've actually been able to do that. The idea that it's to be regulated. We regulate all of our activities, and this is the best place fundamentally for artificial intelligence. And let me just remind you, it's not just generated AI. This is large language models. So they're kind of hyperbole around this thing over there with a LL mind. It's an LL, it's a model, essentially. And in this model, fundamentally, we've created it and we should regulate it. And the Academy is the best place to think about what are the conditions for regulating. We regulate publishing, we regulate our students' production of knowledge, and so this is an extension of the kind of thing that the Academy has actually been very good at. Technologies disappear. Well, in the very early days, it would strike me that when Google and all of these kinds of technologies were out there, probably they were likely much more embedded in the Academy. It's only much, much later that they've actually become significantly commercial enterprises. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we were to sum up here, and I'll get another chance to kind of sum up here, this is a technology that we should have some degree of guarded optimism around. We should look at it with eyes wide open and not shut. And I would say our opposition has got eyes wide shut. Leave the case there.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the opening statements. I'd now like to throw the floor open to questions. And I welcome genuine questions, also challenges to one team or the other, also statements of your own position, engaging with what we've just heard. Any and all are very welcome. You have a few minutes for that. Perhaps the gentleman here, and then after here is the
I can certainly agree that AI is going to, this particular form of large language model, generative AI, is going to change the world that we operate in. And that we might be sufficiently stupid to do that in a stupid way. But is that the fault of the technology?
The gentleman at the table there.
Thank you. I will not be able, under any circumstance, to vote for that. I would have had my doubt if the formulation was will be an important challenge to the academia, because then it would be like all new technologies we have ever had, that it's a challenge to reflect upon. And the human language, not the language model, has the unique capacity to produce and learn people to produce meta languages. And it's clear that AI requires a new meta language so we can understand the limitations, etc., etc. And I think that challenge we have to live with, because AI has come to stay. So I will look at it as a challenge, not as a negative impact. And that will be a topic in education for, you said 20 years for the internet. It may be the same, to develop a sufficient meta language. And that's what all education is about, whether it's a car or an airplane or the book or whatever we had technologies up through this year.
Thank you. A couple of challenges perhaps for our team. I do for the statement. Firstly, it's just a challenge that we have to learn the meta language for. And then if it does all go wrong, is it whose fault is it anyway? I don't know if either of you would like to comment on this.
Yeah, it's absolutely true that we have to live with it. It's absolutely true that AI is here to stay, but what we're arguing is not, is AI going to be here necessarily, it's going to have a negative impact. And I think there are very clear concerns about why it'll lead to this sort of devaluing of research outputs, devaluing of content if people are not sure where something is coming from. Yeah, I think that take from also about like, is it the fault of the technology? Of course not. It's a tool. The tool is like, it's value neutral, but the people using it are what's going to determine what impact it all has. And people cover the vast spectrum of, ethical, well-meaning researchers all the way to incredibly malicious bad actors. And there's enough of the latter, unfortunately, in all industries, that they will be able to exploit this and do bad things with it. And there's also, because of this the incredible pace of the development of AI, the incredibly fast changes that have come about, and the complexity of it to anyone who's not in the AI industry, anyone who's not very well versed in exactly what it's doing and why, mean that there are also a huge middle ground of people who just don't understand what it can do, how it can be used, and how it can be misused. And even those well-meaning people are going to have potentially serious negative impacts, especially in academic publishing.
Thank you very much. The gentleman here right next to the previous speaker, yes, thank you.
Thank you. I want to uphold the people on the right-hand side of yourself, on the left-hand side of the audience here. A few days ago, I talked to somebody about AI, expressing my fear of it, and he or she, I'll leave that in the middle, said, well, we shouldn't be afraid because AI and generative ChatGPT and all the rest doesn't invent anything new. It can only work on the basis of what's already out there on the internet, etc. That sounded like something that should appease me, that should lay my fears. Actually, what I thought is, if it only works on what is there, what it creates is not creation at all. It's just an endless regurgitation and rehash of what's already there. And we know that in academia there's already so much material that we can't even, should master it right now. If ChatGPT ends up adding endless rehashes of what's already there, it's not innovation, it's stifling. Yeah, and that's my main fear.
See somebody like that. You can be a little bit first. Is it just going to stifle what we already have?
precisely you're supporting our case. It reflects what's out there. It goes back to what's out there, and there's not been a claim that it's generated innovation at all. But what is required fundamentally is a mechanism, which is why it's important that it's entering into the academy, is the kinds of protocols for reviewing kind of academic knowledge claims and so on. You know, as we said, degrees of guarded optimism, some degrees of cynicism around what we look at to ask second questions and things like that. So it's not meant to generate innovative and brand new knowledge. It's to be a little bit more efficient about how we might find things. But at the same time, what we also are aware of is huge amounts of knowledge out there that is actually potentially kind of fake knowledge that's kind of being dragged in. What that means fundamentally is that there's a huge job in the academy to educate ourselves, to ask questions, to generate multiple sources of data about a particular. This is good academic practice. Typically, you don't take one source. We say to an undergraduate student, you just read one book, one general article, and that's all you're taking. Go out there, 10, 15, 20. Figure out what the arguments are across the different kinds of sources, and then come to a conclusion. So this is business as usual.
Thank you, Erol. You want to come?
I think the person who answered your question was not truthful or was a little bit ignorant. As an AI researcher myself, I'd like to tell you that it is not true, as has just been said, that it reproduces what exists. It doesn't. What it does, it probabilistically generates sequences which are likely, which means that the sequences generated may never have been generated before. That's perfectly possible. So that is, so it makes itself interesting, it renders itself interesting by its capacity not to reproduce exactly, but to vary around the theme. It's a little bit like music composition, which often have variations around the theme, and one composer may pick up themes from someone else and do things around that. So it has that flavor to it, which makes it interesting and pleasant. The challenge there, though, is that it doesn't check its facts, so that you can have sequences which produce semantics, meaning, which then is against established facts which can be observed outside, okay? But that no one has the time to observe, because you get something which hasn't been checked, and the reader doesn't have time to check the facts either. There are no references, etc. It generates false references to false literature. This is something that it does because it sounds good and it's pleasant to read. So it has that treacherous aspect, may I say, that can mislead a lot of people. Then it feeds upon itself, because the more it produces, the more it feeds in the same vein, and the internal cost functions that it optimizes are unknown to us. What is it trying to optimize? Is it trying to optimize an advertisement for Colgate toothpaste between the lines? What is it doing? We have no idea. So those are the points that make it socially dangerous, while academically dangerous is the aspect of the evaluation of facts, the evaluation of writing, the evaluation of publication, which actually I have personally already observed.
Can I just ask?
Very, very briefly. Yeah.
I was just going to say, in terms of the regurgitation or the reproducing of stuff that's out there, we know already that generated AI models trained on human behavior reproduce human biases. They reproduce racist thoughts, they reproduce sexist thoughts, they reproduce all of these things that are observable in a society, and we train a model on a society that has these sorts of bigotry and these sorts of problems. We see them reproduced in AI outputs. So there's another really big issue in that the regurgitation of knowledge is regurgitating biases and entrenching systemic biases based on the information that models are trained on, and society is a biased society. So that's what they learn from.
Thank you. Yogesh.
Yeah. So I just want to come back on your point. So I think our discussion is just centered on generative AI and not going beyond that. I think AI can do so many other things. So we've been talking about how difficult to find reviewers since morning. how difficult it is to, how time consuming it is to find reviewers for journal editors. AI can help there. It can bring out all appropriate reviewers for a particular articles, and then editor can choose from those. Along with it, would not just bring out the name, but it will also bring out the papers that a particular person has published. And it's already happening. It's not something we are talking in future. We're talking in present. If you look at editorial manager of Elsevier or Stinger, they already, if you go, you can choose reviewer from their recommendations. And recommendation is not happening by itself. It is based on algorithm. So it's already happening. It's more than just generating text. And I can give many other examples. Another big example is we all know that how fast vaccine was developed during COVID. How that happened? Because lots of those trials happened through AI, through artificial intelligence, right? It's not something unknown. We know that many of us are alive because of those vaccines, and those vaccines came within a trial that happens in 10 years, happened in 2 years or in 1 year time. So you can imagine that these things is much beyond just generating text. But even when it comes to generating text, I agree that it predicts, but it cannot predict beyond what is there. It predicts what is there. So the text that is there, that based on that, it is given. Now, it's none of the technology fault that human has biases. If you predict something, it obviously bring out that. And yesterday only I got to know about new technique, machine unlearning. Now they are working on machine unlearning, which actually can be used to unlearn. Models can be unlearned, basically. So whatever they learn, they can forget using that technique. So as advancement is happening in one side, other side also to compensate any problem and issue. So I would say that it's a positive thing for academia. We have embraced so many different technologies in the past, and we have survived and we have excelled, in fact. And I'm sure that this will also carry on. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you've yet heard the killer word that will change your mind. I see lots of hands waving, but unfortunately the time is against us. I caught Pearl's eye when she caught my hands up to go. A very quick one, perhaps from you, Pearl, and a response, and then we'll move to building things. And sorry if there's open which one stuff.
I'd like to ask a question to the team that's in favor of this proposition. And that has everything to do with academia and academic publishing. Right now, the generative AI technology is trained on data that are available on the internet. But we know that there are all kinds of data that are not available on the internet, but nevertheless, are very high quality. I'm thinking of privacy-sensitive data, think of hospital registries. There are systems to allow access to these data under very secure circumstances. That's the privacy data, but there's also copyright protected data. Again, it's possible to access these data under very careful circumstances. My question to you is, would this not be a very positive impact on academia if we allowed our data, because we're all data huggers, many of us are data huggers, but allowed our data to be used to train these models? I'm curious to hear your answer.
I'll try to be very brief. Yes, it's an excellent idea. The problem with what you described, I mean, the problem with the data has nothing to do with AI. It has to do with sanitizing data. Because a lot of the data you talk about is either private, corporate private, or it is personal private, etc., etc. And the sanitizing of the data takes a huge amount of time and cost. About 7 years ago, I had a large research project called Nemesis. One of our partners was Telecom Italia. And to test some attack issues in the internet, we asked Telecom Italia to give us access to some of their data. And they told us that there were two problems. One was the Italian government. because there were regulations concerning the privacy, the personal privacy of a lot of the data that was there. And the second was the cost of actually sanitizing it, because you can make transformations so that you sanitize certain aspects, you remove certain aspects of, and there are huge supercomputer costs associated with that, so we were not able to do that. So I think the barrier has little to do with AI and mostly to do with the fact that a lot of those data sets cannot be put openly into general use. Okay, so for instance, in cyber attack detection, which is also very close to issues of privacy and so on, what we do is we have standard data sets which have been sanitized by friendly partners called DARPA, for instance. Large organizations that can afford to do that, and we use those for testing. But they have been sanitized; they've been collected in a sanitized way, but in a sufficiently realistic way to allow us to do real tests.
Thank you very much indeed. So we now move to the closing statements part of our debate. So I'm going to ask one nominated member of each team to speak just for 3 minutes, the time the screen turned at the tighter, and to address what's been said and give their most convincing final 1-2 punches. Then we'll ask you once again to vote. So first, since this team on this side started, I will be the privilege of finishing, which means Kiera, you go right now.
Okay. All right. So our opponents have argued that, of course, there will be many positive things that AI can achieve. I don't disagree. There are many things it can do. It will be able to automate many mundane tasks. And there are many ethical uses of AI. There are many incredible opportunities that can be achieved through the use of AI. The problem is that not everyone is an ethical user of AI. The problem is that this is a huge step change in the scale and the speed and the scope of things that can be done by an average person on the internet who has no idea what sort of tool they're working with. So we don't deny that there are positive points, but when we talk about making mundane tasks more efficient, our opponents mentioned the example of like, an undergrad doesn't just read one paper, you ask them to go read 15 papers or 20 papers. I would argue that as an undergrad sees reading 20 papers on a subject as a mundane task they probably don't care a lot about, and they may well just go and ask ChatGPT, hey, summarize these 20 papers for me and tell me what I should think about this piece of information. It's going to happen, it's already happening. We know that students are using ChatGPT to write essays to summarize information. You could use AI to choose a reviewer for an article, but again, we come back to that question of then entrenched biases. On what criteria is the AI deciding who the best reviewer to suggest is? Is it going to entrench the same people who are already famous in their fields? Is it going to bias? Is it going to be biased against new researchers, early career researchers who may not show up in a database yet, or may not be, prominent enough to be recognized by the system that's choosing your reviewers to suggest for you? So again, we have this issue of the black boxes. We don't know exactly what's being chosen or why. We have no transparency in that sort of thing. And we see this over and over again. We see all of these AI models that are being used to automate the mundane, but in ways that are not transparent, and ways that we don't know to what extent they're perpetuating biases, and in ways that undermine, again, undermine the research outputs, undermine the content that's being produced by academics and by journal publishing generally. Because we don't know to this day now what has been generated by an AI, what has been actually gone under with serious thorough human review, and automating mundane is going to make people take shortcuts. We know it's going to happen because people are people and they have limited time and limited resources. I also agree that, of course, policy and regulation is going to be crucially important for AI in the future, but policy and regulation moves so slowly. And so what is the damage that's going to be done in the meantime? What are the negative effects that are going to happen before we have properly thorough regulations for AI, especially academic publishing? It may well be that in 10, 20 years' time, we come to an equilibrium, we come to a situation where we have really thorough understanding of what AI is used for, what's used in academic publishing, but that's going to be a fair way off. If we look at how long it's taken for things like the Open Access Initiative to really make progress, it's been 20 years, right, since the Budapest Open Access Initiative. So I think, again, in this industry, given the incentives to take shortcuts, given the slow-moving policy changes, there's a particular risk that AI will have negative effects on academic publishing.
Thank you very much. And final closing statement from Susan. You have.
So thank you. So colleagues, you're voting one way or another. So the question of biases. This is what the Academy is always about. There is not one piece of text that is not generated that in some way does not have a bias in it. And isn't that what we do in the Academy? So these biases might be set by particular perspectives, paradigms within disciplines, and so on. And this is precisely what you get in the Academy, is to learn to detect biases. So why are we holding the ChatGPT, for example, to a much higher standard of no bias whatsoever, when actually fundamentally all of our texts are biased in some way? There's a very cynical view about many of our colleagues. They're always going to take the shortcut, or they're going to be not ethical. Well, there's always the student or the academic that's taking the shortcut. But many people don't. Many people are responsible. They ask hard questions like we are today, you're here today, and so on. And if I was the lecturer, what I'd be doing is anticipating those 6 or 7 papers on the reading list, running it through ChatGPT and getting a bit of a sense of what that output would look like. And quite quickly, I have in front of me what a lazy student writing at 5 o'clock in the morning might well be producing, and it might look a bit like that. And that's not a huge investment of my time. It's been done quite smartly for me. The genie is out of the bottle. And so rather than be frightened of this thing, why would we not do what we as human societies are quite good about doing? And that is try to understand what's going, as we said earlier, walk into this not with eyes wide shut, but eyes wide open. And what that means then is not giving this thing we don't anthropomorphize it, we don't make it a magical thing, we don't see it as something that's, King Kong around the corner, but actually a tool that can be shaped, trained, as Wardman says, we shape technologies do shape us, and we're not arguing against that. But when we're shaping these technologies, let's shape them in ways in which we recognise ethics, bias, human foibles, so we put that case.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to both sides. It only remains, yes, thank you. It only remains to take the final all-important vote. So once again, I would like a show of hands, please, ladies and gentlemen, for those in the room. First of all, if you are in favour of the statement behind you, which means you agree with this team here and think that AI is bad news, would you please wave your hand at me right now? Thank you. And those who have the opposite feeling think that AI is at least unthreatening, if not apologetic to us. Oh, no, a lot of people voting in total. That's very interesting. So, someone who's better at maths than me can crunch the numbers here. According to my calculations, we initially had 8 votes for, plus 1 online, so let's say 9, and 6 votes against. So we now have 17 for and 10 against. Anybody want to tell me who you want to be? 9 to 6, so that's an extra 50%, yeah, which means that the pendulum swung a little bit towards you guys, I think. That's right? Yeah.
Kind of more than 15%. 50%.
Ah, yeah, okay. I beg your pardon. Yes, exactly.
It was
50%, yeah. 7%, yeah. Which means 7% on your side rather than 52. Yeah. It only remains for me to thank all our panelists and the audience. Thank you for your energy, especially at the end of the day when you're expecting a social event following very soon. I do want particularly though to thank Susan, who's put in at less than 20 hours notice. Did an excellent job.